Good day, everybody. My name is Patty Torsney, and I'm the permanent observer for the Inter-Parliamentary Union at the United Nations in New York. And I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Alessandro Motter, who will be making a presentation. He's our Senior Advisor on Social and Economic Affairs, and Sandrine Guigon, who is doing some backup support for us this morning. This session is a little different than some of our other briefings. We have been doing a number of one-hour briefings on important issues at the United Nations to inform our members of Parliament. This session is designed to help engage parliamentarians specifically from 42 countries. Those countries are submitting their voluntary national review reports to the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development in July next year. And in the process of setting up those voluntary national reviews, it clearly says that countries are supposed to include parliamentarians in that process. So we thought that this morning we would provide you an opportunity, as your country, as I said, is participating in this process, to find out how some other countries have done well in this process, because we've been doing a survey for a number of years on this. Without further ado, I will ask the Deputy Speaker of the from Andorra, from the General Council, who will be speaking in French. And if you need interpretation, there's on the bottom of your screen, if you just tap your cursor a little bit, you can choose what language you hear this in, whether it's English or French or the floor. And so I will ask Meritxell Palmitjavila, who is the Deputy Speaker from Andorra, to tell us how her Parliament participated in the VNR process and how they engage with the government to make sure the views of the people and that oversight function were both included. Without further ado, Deputy Speaker, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me well. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mrs. Paddy, for inviting us to this presentation. First of all, I would like to highlight the fact that this experience, this voluntary national review, it is the first time that we are doing it, and it has been quite a challenge for us. Why is it the first time we do that review? Well, it is a request coming from our Foreign Affairs Ministry, and to do that examination, that review, I come from the educational world, so I know that it is quite difficult to be part of this process and to carry out a qualitative review. And I would like to underline the fact that the presentation, that the evaluation that we are presenting today is rather qualitative, is more qualitative than quantitative than qualitative, sorry. This said, at the level of the Parliament, we are more focusing on the qualitative aspect. And why is that? Well, because it is not easy to assess whether the laws we adopt can help reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. So you made a specific request, so I suppose that you are particularly interested in the tool that we used. So that report is based on quantitative indicators, based on the analysis of the laws adopted in the 2019-2022 period. So it's called scan.ad, and that tool enabled us to participate to that review of our legislation, and it hasn't been easy at first. And what has encouraged me as well to promote that review within the General Council is to be able to encourage my parliamentarian colleagues to engage and to reflect on that process, which is crucial to reach the SDGs. But for that, we need the relevant tools to facilitate that review and to make sure that we can better analyze our progress. So this assessment and this tool has been developed with the Foundation Andorra Innovation, the General Council, and the Foreign Affairs Ministry that have also helped us and contributed to that work. I'm going to show you that document and give you more information on that topic. So we have two main elements. We have a research tool, first of all. I'm waiting for the document to appear on the screen. So two main elements are part of that tool. So first of all, it is a search engine. And the second element is a number of dictionaries containing the list of the objectives, as well as specific text linked to each objective. It is a version that only concerns a number of objectives: SDG 4, 5, 10, and 13. And you will see why we have only focused on these areas. It took us quite a long time to develop that tool. So this scan, ads.ad, is an innovative tool which enables to identify in a text or in a document the expressions linked to the SDGs. And it has been implemented to identify the information related to the SDGs thanks to an advanced system of automatic labeling. The functioning of that tool is based on a database related to the SDGs, which, thanks to an automatic labeling process, classifies the expressions introduced depending on their relation with the SDGs. And then it displays all the relevant information depending on their needs. The users can upload or download the documents in order to scan them. So as I said, it is a quantitative assessment. Why? Because the dictionary we have uploaded in that tool researches the expression that are directly linked to the SDGs. And then depending on the number of words, we have an idea of the work that has been carried out to reach these SDGs. So it is not a comprehensive assessment. It is only a first step, since we would need a second step, which would be to create indicators that could effectively assess the implementation of these laws related to the SDGs. So, of course, we are at the beginning of that work. There's still a lot of work to be done to be able to carry out a comprehensive qualitative and quantitative assessment. I'm just showing you here the document so that you can see the results that we can have with this tool. So you can see that it is the analysis that we can carry out. And I'm going to give you an example using one SDG. So here, we have the number of laws related to SDG. Sorry, my apologies. So to SDG 4. Well, let's take SDG 10 rather. So here you have the overview that you can see in that tool. So you can see the number of coincidences of expressions related to that SDG. So we can see that for that SDG number 10 related to inequalities among countries, here we can clearly have we can clearly see the content of the laws that are related to that SDG. So, for example, facilitating migration, here we have an average result.
Sorry, someone's, and hello, can I get people to mute, please? Thank you. I think the speaker is, deputy speaker is just finishing up this section. Thank you. Je m'excuse.
So we have point 10.2, social and economic inclusion, and here you have the content of the law that relates to that indicator. So here you can have an idea of the overviews that we can see after scanning these documents. And this is what the tool helps us to do. Another example, let's take, I don't know.
Sorry, can I ask, can we come back? Est-ce que c'est possible de retourner à un autre exemple?
Can we come back to the first example?
No, afterwards. Can we come back to another example? Let me turn to the other presenters, and let's. I'm just gonna stop. If you could, if I can. Okay.
So here you have SDG 5. So reaching gender equality and supporting all women and girls. So the phrasing is maybe is not the right one, but the idea is the same. So here you have the policies related to equality, and here we have 35 results. So even if we only have 35 results, we can see that it is less important than the other objective indicator, which is the end of discrimination against women. And here we have 307 results. So here we can see what has been more developed. And we have a number of indications, thanks to that tool, for the parliamentarians to be able to see what should be improved and which aspect of these laws should be improved or strengthened.
Terrific. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I wonder if I can just stop you there. Oui, c'est possible qu'il y a les questions après. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing me to present that evaluation. And if you have any question, don't hesitate.
Thank you very much. So in Andorra, they had a specific way to present the information about how their parliament was participating or how their government was participating or engaging in implementing the SDGs. Of course, there are 17 SDGs with 169 targets. And so there was a focus on just 4 last year for all the VNRs from all the countries. Alessandro Motter will now just give us a bit more of an overview about the process and what parliaments should be doing at the macro level, how they present that information. One example here is what Andorra has done, but let's talk about the macro level now. Alessandro? Yes.
Thank you. All right. So the VNR, as we heard, is basically a report that governments have to voluntarily submit to the high-level forum in July. Why is it important? It is one of the most important expressions of accountability at the global level, where governments tell the story to the international community of how they are progressing and what they're doing towards the SDGs. But it's also accountability at the national level, because the process is supposed to be inclusive and transparent and bring all of the actors together at the national level, so that together they take stock of where the country is and what policies are being put in place or are lacking, so that the country can move towards the SDGs. So in that sense, it's also a huge exercise in building national ownership for the SDGs, because it's not just a report that governments write, inside the ministry. It's not a bureaucratic exercise. It's a political exercise. It's one in which the various communities, and in the case of our community in the parliament, we get to ask the government, are we doing well enough? Are we on the right track? What is wrong with the policies that we have been fielding, as opposed to what we need to do differently? So the UN itself and member states have agreed that parliaments need to be involved, they're part of the picture. In itself, that's a huge progress compared to where we started years ago. We have governments actually saying, yes, parliaments ought to be involved. There's a handbook from the UN that says so as well. And resolutions of the General Assembly that invite a contribution of parliaments into the VNR. The question is it actually happening, and how? The process, we're having this briefing today because the process is supposed to start literally around this time of the year, inside each of the 42 countries presenting reports next year. And depending on the country and how they set up how they intend to go about it, it may be taking 3 to 6 months. So we go well into May or next year, but certainly by the end of May or next year, almost everybody should be done. And the report should be ready, at least a draft that goes into the UN. The IPU, as a global organization, we want to make sure that parliaments are as much as possible involved, and we want to also gauge the extent, the depth of this involvement at the end of the day, so that we can track over time, year after year, how is that improving. For that reason, we run a survey that you will be receiving. It's a natural form, nothing too complicated. You will receive sometime in May, and with a deadline of a few weeks, so that you report in June, and we can compile the data and then present the data to our meeting at the Parliamentary Forum that happens on the occasion of the HRPF itself in July. Let me just say now in a few words, what is in this, what is that we're asking and why. There will be 2 main questions and 7 sub-questions, but the gist of it is in 2 parts, really. The first part, we're querying whether the Parliament was at all aware of the VNRs. Incredibly, there are still many parliaments that see the VNR go by, past them, they've never seen or heard a word about it. Then we're asking, well, did the government present a consultation plan to the country and to the parliament, publicly explaining there is this process that we're now beginning, we want to, this is how we are going to go about it, this will be the timelines, this will be the communities that we intend to consult with, this will be the various stages where people can input, and then all the way to the end. And then we're asking, well, in this plan, is there a word said about Parliament? How the Parliament is also from the beginning considered on the side of the government. And the second part of the questionnaire, we go more into the nitty-gritty, and we're asking basically, did the Parliament provide any input into the process at the end of the day? And then we want to get a sense of, by a few proxy questions, we want to get a sense of the quality of this input. We heard from Andorra, the fine distinction between quantitative and qualitative. And in fact, the quality is really at least as important, because numbers don't really tell the whole story. We need to go a little deeper. So we will be asking questions like the timing by which Parliament was engaged. Were you just informed at the beginning and then left aside, or were you able to be part of the process as it was happening, or only at the very end, when suddenly the government presents you with a draft report that says, now you have, tell us what you think, with the expectation that not much will change in the report actually. Then we'll be asking questions that will query about the modalities by which the Parliament was able to provide input. To our reckoning, the most important modality, the most effective, is when things happen within the settings of a parliamentary committee, where hearings are held with the minister and the various departments, where there is a draft report that's put together, then there's questions presented by the parliamentarians, and then with a request to come back with improvements, and that kind of back and forth, mainly meetings, until finally the committee is satisfied that we have a solid presentation to the UN. But then there are other modalities that are utilized. For example, the most often MPs will be invited to government-led workshops that are held in the community outside. There are sometimes asking questions at question time of the minister is considered a modality of engagement as well. But certainly the parliamentary committee setting is the most effective in our view. And then we will be asking, well, by what information did the parliament have in order to assess where the country is with respect to the SDGs? Is it mainly government provided information, which can be biased in favor of the government? Or is it independent information that comes from experts, university departments, civil society organizations, or the Parliament's own internal research service, or the Parliamentary Budget Office, if there is one, that kind of thing. So we try to dissect that information. And then finally, the survey will ask basically, what difference did it make? If the Parliament actually provided input, what was the difference in terms of the impact on the actual product? Was the parliamentary perspective somehow included in the final report? Or how did the Parliament basically find the government ultimately represented the country in the report at the UN? So that is really what we're after. Let me just give you just a sense of what has happened this last round in 2022, because we do have the results of the survey. We don't have time to go through that in detail. We will do that at the next session of the our UN Committee on UN Affairs in Bahrain. But just now, right now, I just want to impress you with one number that is a concern to us, and that is the low participation rate of the parliaments in our survey, which is one reason why we're having this briefing now. We realize maybe one reason why only 31% of the parliaments that that received our survey questionnaire this year responded. That means 13 out of 42 countries, 42 parliaments, leaves us a little bit wondering what is going on. Why is it that parliaments are not, those who don't answer at all, and do so because they have no relations at all with the government on this VNR process? Or is it a disconnect between the IPU group secretariats and the rest of the parliament? And maybe there are some committees, some structures of parliaments that are involved in the VNRs, but the IPU groups are not entirely connected to that process, so they don't know how to answer the survey. So we're trying to also understand, have a conversation on this question of the relatively low response rate to our survey. So that's one number I want to impress you with from this exercise this year. Only 31% of respondents. Of the 13 who responded, most of them said that they were aware of the VNR, but only half said that the consultation plan presented by the government mentioned parliaments in some ways, said that somehow parliament will be consulted. So that also brings the bar down further in terms of the depths of the awareness of the process, let alone the engagement. And generally, I just want to conclude. Generally, from the other questions we have asked, the impression we're getting is that the quality of the input provided tends to be low. I'll give you one example. Of the 13 respondents, only one parliament said we actually had a discussion within a parliamentary committee through a hearing process. 7 out of 13 said we depended entirely on the information that the government gave us in order to respond, to have an input into the process, as opposed to looking at outside sources, independent sources, or something that would be providing counterfactual information, if you will, to what the government is putting out in its draft report. So that is what we wanted to focus you on, both the modalities of this exercise, the timing, what is expected of you when we receive this report, and also engage in the conversation as to how do we mobilize, get better responses to the exercise so that we can actually have an impact in this, greater impact into the VNR process at the UN, and come back to the UN with more complete data, and that would give us a thorough picture of what is going on. I should only say in closing, we also read the actual VNRs. We also read the actual VNRs, all of them, we scan them to see how governments, whether they actually refer to parliaments being engaged, And in some cases, we find some reports that refer to the engagement of Parliament, and strangely, the questionnaire from the same Parliament on occasion said that the Parliament has had no engagement, or we have no response from the Parliament. So we don't know if the government is actually telling the truth, so to speak, or whether they are kind of embellishing the calling engagement of Parliament when they only have maybe a couple of MPs come to a workshop. So you see the difficulty that we're having in trying to put together the pieces that would give us a strong composite picture of what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you. And of course, the whole point of this exercise and the VNRs themselves is to make sure that the SDGs actually get implemented. We are running out of time in terms of government action. And so the goal is to have parliaments help push their governments to achieve the SDGs. And so this exercise, this opportunity is here for all of you to help make sure that your government is on track. Andrina is with us today. She's the deputy of the delegate to the Swiss government for the 2030 agenda. And Andrina Frey, please tell us about how your government engaged with the parliament in developing the VNR reports, because I think you have a good story to tell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I have to say directly that I see that I'm under the supervision of one of our parliamentarians here, so he might be in a position to complement. I will now switch to French, to one of our official national languages, and do my presentation in French.
Thank you very much. First of all, we are not champions here in Switzerland when it comes to the role of our parliament and how we include our parliament in this process. We have presented a review in 2016, and then we did another report in 2018 and another one in 2022 to the HLPF. So we did an overview through S-Digital 2030. So that's the tool we have used, and this has enabled us to enlarge the methodology of data collection. So we have digitalized the process in order to simplify, decentralize, and better structure the process. And secondly, in order to collect data and also publish information in a transparent and integrated tool. And thirdly, the objective was to develop a system to enable several outputs, the report, but also other output linked to the implementation of the SDGs. And first of all, to establish a sustainable long-term database for the years to come, so that we already have a good base of data, and also to facilitate the involvement of stakeholders. So this information has to come from the government, but also from the whole, from other stakeholders. And the objective is also to make that report accessible to the public, and that's also the responsibility we have with our population. And as you know, Switzerland is renowned for its direct or semi-direct democracy, where the population can directly participate in our decision-making process through referendums. In our VNR process, we have also highlighted the importance of inclusion, enabling many stakeholders to take part in this review process. And all these stakeholders could share their assessment of the participation of Switzerland in the implementation of the SDGs, and they have also had the opportunity to share their own actions, the action that they have taken. So it is really a an agenda that's for everyone. It's not just the national government that is responsible for its implementation. It is also the subnational level, as well as the civil society players, the private sector, the scientific entities, etc. Now, more specifically, regarding the role of the parliaments, a year ago, exactly, the parliamentary group on the SDGs has been set up, and all parties are represented in this group, and they are also sharing the presidency of that group. And the group is looking at a number of solutions across all parties to reach the SDGs. And since we have the right balance of powers in our country, the government is not involved in the work of that group, but there is an exchange with the government. Moreover, the foreign policy committees also discuss the VNR during one of their sessions. A meeting was convened 2 weeks ago, and another committee will discuss it next Tuesday. So I think it is an excellent opportunity to exchange and to also have the SDG and the VNR at the agenda of our parliament. But of course, it is a retrospective process. What we have observed through that exchange when one of the two committees is an important change, which is the question that have been asked were directly linked to the national implementation. And in the past, when talking about the 2030 agenda, it was more focused on cooperation for development. So the work of Switzerland abroad, overseas, and this time it was more focused on how the SDGs are being implemented nationally in Switzerland. And this shows also that there's more ownership at national level. To conclude, we hope that the Parliament will be more involved in the future. We can also see that it is also very much related to the interests expressed by the parliamentarians, and this is often an opportunity to improve the exchanges, and we are very, very hopeful as far as the work of that parliamentarian group is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrina. And of course, parliamentarians play a key role in helping to popularize and communicate the importance of the SDGs. And so that's why it's another reason why it's helpful for them to be involved, both in the reporting process, but also in the implementation as well. I don't know, Mr. Worley, if you would like to make any comments on this process from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much, Paddy. And I'd like to thank Mrs. Frey for this brief presentation. I just wanted to remind that the creation of that parliamentarian group is a voluntary initiative, and we can have several meetings throughout the year, so we don't need to wait for the next process to discuss that topic with the parliamentarians. And of course, we need that for to make a good follow-up and to prepare the next report with the parliamentarians. So that's all I wanted to say. I I am here because I'm also focusing on the links with the IPU. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll now turn to questions. We've seen, as Mr. Verley has said, engagement through the committee and check-ins every so often with the government, and this opportunity to engage. We've seen very technical, high quality reports and systems of analyzing legislation that obviously the MPs are probably not doing on their own. There's probably a lot of good support from staff who are doing this. There are, you've heard about the survey that we will send to each parliamentary group through the IPU contacts that will ask you about what your parliament's doing. And that survey for the last 6 years has told us something sort of late in the process about what happened. And this purpose of this briefing is to say, look, try and get involved, not just so we can have better outcomes, more answers to our survey, but actual outcomes where more parliaments are engaging and holding their governments to account and fulfilling their oversight function and making sure the SDGs are in fact implemented. So while it's usual we have many MPs who speak and very few staff who speak, I do think that this is sort of a technical briefing, and I would encourage staff who are interested in asking about how to get engaged to also ask questions. So if you want to put your hand up, I will see you, and you could ask Andrina how they engaged with the parliamentary bureaucrats perhaps, or timed things, or what they've done. So staff, if you are interested in asking a question, please do so as well. I know the Deputy Speaker is still with us, and people from her team are here. And we also know that in light of COP27, that action is needed now. We do have a briefing. We had expected to have the UN resident coordinator from Rwanda, which would be part of the responsibilities of UNDP on the ground in various countries to help those parliaments prepare the report, or help the government prepare the report, and hopefully involve the parliamentarians, as Alessandro said, it's part of the process you're supposed to engage with. Are there any other questions? Is there, Andrina, is there something you would like to add? Canada, you're about to embark on the process. Natalie, Olivier, Peter, Vasco, Tristan, you've got a process coming up in Tanzania. What are your plans? We do have a few minutes to pose those questions. And then at the very end, I can show a video from Azonia, who couldn't actually join because of the internet connection.
Thank you, everybody. I'm here for the clerk of our National Assembly, Honorable Muhambi. But for our party here, we don't have anything to provide, to present for today, but I think we have learned a lot from our colleagues who have presented a lot of stories, a lot of experience from their counterparties. So I think for today, we just decided to be observer for today. Perfect. And then, yeah, we'll be providing our contribution while the report is ready. So thank you so much for today.
Thanks, terrific. We do have a lot of people from Romania and Zambia on the briefing as well. So I don't know if you have plans to share, or if this has just been informative to you. We're good with that. Natalie from Canada.
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
The presentations were really useful. I wonder if the slide presentation from Andorra will be made available to all of us. I thought that was really useful to know that they have put together for their purposes a framework, or a system where they were actually able to collect data and to have some kind of an assessment, not just on to SDGs, such as the Parliamentary Indicators Framework that the IPU worked on with the CPA, but on many SDGs. And that might be very illustrative to be able to have a good opportunity to study how they did that.
Terrific. Andorra, perhaps there is a way for you to share with us the link to that report. It must be on your parliamentary website. I don't know if our friends from Andorra can come back in and answer that question, but we'll endeavor to get that for you. A reminder that the HLPF each year focuses on, Alessandro, Andrina, help me, four or five SDGs and has an overarching theme. So countries are asked to report on a specific group of indicators.
No, on the whole thing, but with a focus on a specific cluster.
Okay, right. So the whole thing, but a specific cluster is drilled down. Andrina?
Yes, if I may, you asked if I had any additions. Maybe one point regarding timing, something that we realized. You said, yeah, governments are about to start. I can say that we started 1.5 years in advance, and that is also linked to we have very slow and sometimes rather heavy processes to also already get a report approved by the government. And then if you want also to include all the different stakeholders, timing is really key. And I think what is actually really helpful if these relationships are already established. And as Mr. Verley also said, that it's not just, you don't just look at the next report, but you use also, we report every 4 years, so that we also use these 4 years to actually keep the conversation going. And then that when it's really about reporting, that's in fact, that's just for us, in our case at least, it's a stock taking, and then we have a strategy and action plans that look at the way forward. And I think, in my view, it's almost even more important that also parliaments and parliamentarians come in at that point, because that's when you decide on the direction we as a country are gonna take. So yeah, just to make that point, that I really think timing is key, and to have enough preparation time.
Terrific. Alessandro, I think you're moving. Okay.
Can I add a point to that question of timing? It's actually a very good point. Because one problem is that, yes, a country like Switzerland, knowing that they're going to volunteer down the road to, they can start this process 1.5 years before. But the problem is most governments actually seem to make the decision just in the fall before. Basically the official communication to ECOSOC that is circulated to the UN community in New York is dated only October, basically. So of the year before. So that gives us also the IPU and the parliament very, very little time to kick into action, if you will, and try to work a plan with the government. So the timing is definitely an issue for many parliaments, potentially, given how fast things in many countries that are serious about this process, how fast things will move once it's announced that a country is participating.
Thank you. Stephen from Zambia.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you see me?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. That was a lovely presentation. From Zambia, we were largely observers, but wish to share information that we have a caucus of members of parliament on SDGs. It's a voluntary grouping led by Dr. Christopher Kalila. So by and large, besides the parliamentary committees, it has been the interface between parliament and the executive on the progress made in implementation. So in the towards the drive to implement the SDGs. Yes. So Yeah, and it's been quite active, I should report. Thank you.
Terrific. So it'll be that caucus that will be engaged in ensuring that the VNR that's filed in July is the best possible or
I think that can be
reflects
the best
accurately?
entry point. I think that can be the best entry point for the engagement.
Okay. So, of course, each country has designed a national action plan, and all parliamentarians should be able to get a copy of that plan and then see. Many countries have reported at least once already. In fact, I think all countries have reported at least once. So that might be another tool as a starting block. What was the national plan? What was the first report? What are we going to report this time? How do we engage parliamentarians? And in the notification of this meeting, we included the list of all the countries who've, as Andrina and Alessandro have said, indicated that they were going to make a report this coming year. And so, you know, this is an opportunity, whether it's all of the indicators or a focus on just the ones that are being highlighted, or perhaps even narrower focus, that would be interesting. Whatever is within the capability of your parliament and interest is up to you. We're trying to make sure that everyone has the tools to do what they want to do and to share that best practice.
I guess that can be done. And I know the lead ministry is the Minister of Finance.
Perfect.
I think it's the coordinating unit for all SDGs implementation. So I guess that information can be easy to get and compile.
Terrific. So they have some good financial indicators and putting the money behind the goals. Terrific. If there are no further questions, I will show the video that Azonia sent to us. It's a bit more of a larger perspective of why this whole process is happening. And those of you who wish to run can run. And those of you who wish to watch the video, it's about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. But it's there to give you some context. I think it's helpful for those of you who are working on the technical side to understand why we are here. I would like to say thank you to Andrina, who stepped up and is representing her government on how they worked on their last and many reports on the VNR, and to Alessandro for providing that really important information on the survey that's coming and how we're trying to help you be prepared to answer that. And although we can't see Andorra, we did see their beautiful mountains in the background, and we do thank them for that really interesting and technical report, and to see how they presented the information, because the visualization of it helps the public understand it, helps all of us understand it. And that's an important thing as well. So hopefully we will get that copy of that report and share it with all of you who registered today. And to all of you, thank you very much for participating. And as I said, those of you who wish to see Azonia, he's had a lot of experience in VNRs, both in, I think it's Kyrgyzstan and now in Rwanda. And his video gives you some context. So to those of you who leave us now, thank you very much. And for those of you who are staying to watch this, I hope you enjoy the video, and we will again thank you all for participating. And Alessandro's at am@ipu.org, and I'm pt@ipu.org. If you need further information, we're very happy to help you out with that.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the Secretariat of the Inter-Parliamentary Union for this opportunity to join this conversation on voluntary national reviews, what parliaments need to know. You may recall that in 2012, we had the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, what has come to be known as Rio+20 on the future we want. This conference established the high-level political forum on sustainable development, but also came up with an outcome document on the future we want. This high-level political forum has become the global architecture for the follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda, which was established by the General Assembly, as well as on the implementation of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs. In 2019, the high-level political forum called for gearing up for a decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. This was as a result of the evidence that no country is on course to meet the SDGs or most of the targets And then this situation has now been worsened by the impact of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. And therefore, when we had 20, Rio Plus 20, the member states adopted the outcome document that had a number of provisions in terms of what a common vision should be. The first was an agreement to renew commitment to sustainable development. This agreement was the first time that the global community recognized the trinity of social, economic, and environmental factors as constituting sustainable development for ourselves, for our future, for our planet, for present and future generations. The second was on eradicating poverty as the greatest challenge facing the world and as an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. The participants therefore committed themselves to freeing humanity from poverty and hunger as a matter of urgency. They also established connections between poverty alleviation, changing on sustainable, but also promoting sustainable patterns of consumption and production, protecting and managing our natural resource base, promoting inclusive economic growth, reducing inequalities, fostering equitable development, reaffirming the importance of freedom, peace and security, respect for all human rights. All of these principles have, of course, since been translated into Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. The evidence on the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, was that many countries didn't meet most of them or all of them. And therefore, in adopting Agenda 2030, member states recognize the importance of a process to accompany implementation of the SDGs. This process is to be country-owned, taking into account the national realities and recognizing that country ownership is central to the implementation of Agenda 2030. The VNR approach, therefore, is voluntary, transparent, and participatory, but is also based on robust evidence. All segments of society are expected and often do participate in the VNR process. The process facilitates learning from national experiences and promotes accountability to citizens. It focuses on three key dimensions. How is the country in question ensuring that none of its citizens is being left behind? The second is, what are the trade-offs for SDG implementation? And trade-offs here look at the interplay of factors and priorities that enable a member state to then determine what to focus on and how the results from the areas that are targeted can cascade to other areas. And then the third element is on the means of implementation. So the VNR process tracks progress on goals, focuses on people with particular attention to human rights, but also the people being furthest behind, and takes a long-term perspective. It's very rigorous and evidence-based. There are usually national consultation processes, regional meetings, main messages summarizing the key findings from the country review, and then the presentation of the report itself at the high-level political forum. So the high-level political forum where the VNR is presented has become a kind of peer support process where countries learn from each other, share successes and challenges, lessons learned, but also adapt any insights, approaches and methodologies that may be relevant to the national context. Agenda 2030 and the SDGs provide us a universal framework that recognizes that countries differ in their challenges and resources. They are therefore called upon to develop their own nationally specific agendas. At each stage of the process I've outlined above, I have laid out above, there are clearly opportunities and entry points for parliaments to deepen their engagement and participation in the process. More importantly, the Voluntary National Review is a very important mechanism to deepen the Parliament's obligation to its citizens, which is to ensure the fullest accountability of all public officers to the citizen and that every citizen is included in national development. It is therefore of utmost importance that parliaments engage fully in the VNR process, provide the platforms for different conversations on what is working at the national level, what is not working, what the challenges are, and how these should then be addressed. And based on these reflections, to translate these conversations at the parliamentary level into legislation or legal instruments, and then at the level of the executive into policies and strategies to address the key issues. And then Parliament uses its auspices to ensure the fullest accountability of all public office holders to the implementation of the agreed strategies, policies, and legal instruments. So the VNR process is not something that takes place in vacuum. It's a central plank of a national development agenda. It is where policy meets practice, where the elected parliamentary representatives of the people ensure that those who have responsibilities deliver on those responsibilities. So to all the countries that will be participating in the VNR process in 2023, I wish you every luck. That includes Rwanda, at which I am the resident coordinator, and I'd like to assure you of the fullest support of the United Nations country team in Rwanda to the second VNR process for Rwanda. Thank you for your kind attention.